So, last time we talked about the Greek creation myth, how the Greeks believed that the world was brought into being long, long ago. And the story sort of ended with Zeus and his brothers and sisters coming out on top, so to speak. And those 12 or 13 gods are known as the Olympians. And they're called the Olympians because they live on top of Mount Olympus in their palace. Now, there's 12 or 13 of them. I'll get to the 13th part in a second. There's the first six to start with: Zeus, Hera, Hestia, Poseidon, Hades, and Demeter. They're the first generation. The later generation includes Hephaestus, Ares, Hermes, Aphrodite, and Athena. And then later on, along comes a Johnny-come-lately named Dionysus, and he takes the place of Hestia up on Mount Olympus. So there's 12 thrones up on Mount Olympus, but at certain times there's 13 Olympians in place. But before I get into the stories of the Olympians and the heroes and demigods that come after, I want to give a bit of a primer on how the ancient Greeks believed the world was formed and functioned. And side note, that word, primer, it's spelled primer, but when you're talking about an introductory text, something that introduces a topic, you pronounce it primer. Why? Because English is weird. Paint, primer. Book, primer. It's just the way it goes. Now, onto the stories. The ancient Greeks believed in what I call the snow globe model of the earth. First, you have sort of a flat disc or dish. On top of that is the earth. The mountains, the rivers, the forests, the valleys, all of that is on top. Up above that is a glass or crystal dome. And that dome forms the sky. Hanging from that dome are the stars that we see at night. What's on the other side of that dome? Well, on the other side of the dome is endless water. If that dome falls, all the waters come through and wash everything away. And occasionally the gods will open the domes to allow in rain, or, in the case of one significant story, a flood to wash all the problems away. So that's above. You have the land that you and I see, the sky above it, the dome that forms the vault of the heavens that all the stars are hanging from, and one person holds up that dome. In the last story, we talked about the Titans, and they were the generation before Zeus, and they were led by King Cronus. And Zeus, defeated them with the help of his brothers and sisters and threw them into the pit, Tartarus. And not every Titan went into the pit. There's two in particular I'm going to talk about right now. The first being Atlas. Atlas was the biggest and strongest of the Titans. He was the last to bend knee to Zeus, and he got a special punishment. His punishment was he was put on the edge of the earth, and his job was to hold up the dome of the sky for all of eternity. He couldn't move, he couldn't leave, just this poor, dumb son of a gun stuck there holding up the sky for eternity. And he has two breaks. One of them we'll get to in the story of Heracles, also known as Hercules, where he gets a few minutes break. And his other break is the sort of break people get in Greek mythology. The hero Perseus had the head of Medusa, and Perseus, out of mercy, used Medusa's head to turn Atlas into stone, at which point he became the Atlas Mountains. And so he's just this giant stone titan holding up the sky. That's his big break. Not that he doesn't have to hold up the sky anymore. He's just turned into rock, so he doesn't care so much. But in my opinion, he did a lot better than his brother Prometheus. Now, Prometheus actually started out as a favorite of Zeus. He was one of the Titans who had sided with Zeus, and he was given a special privilege. He was a creator, and he helped create many, many animals that are on the earth. He did that. His brother Titan did that, and also Poseidon created a lot of monsters. Sorry, not monsters, animals. Um, Prometheus created one very, very special animal in particular: humans. He built humans in the shape of the gods, designed after the gods themselves. And Zeus and the others were happy with what he had made. But Prometheus wasn't just happy with what he had made, he loved them. He loved the humans. And he loved them so much that it hurt him to see them cold and scared at night and eating raw meat. And so Prometheus went to Zeus and he begged Zeus, my lord, please let me bring fire to the humans so that they can have heat, so they can have light at night, so they're not afraid of the shadows of the dark, so they don't have to eat raw meat like a savage animal. They're built in your image. They deserve better than that. But Zeus said no because, well, fire was meant for the gods, not for people. Prometheus, though, did not like that answer. And so he went on a raid. He snuck into Mount Olympus. He grabbed some of the sacred flame and he smuggled it out of Mount Olympus down to the earth, and he gifted humans with fire. And that was good for the humans. It ended up not being good for Prometheus, because Zeus is sitting in his throne room one day and he's like, oh, what is that lovely smell? And he goes to the window and it's drifting up from the earth below. It's like, it smells like roasting meat. Such a lovely smell. I mean, because who doesn't like a barbecue? But then Zeus looked down from Mount Olympus and he saw all the fires twinkling in the night. And he knew what had happened. And so he captured Prometheus and punished him in what has to be one of the worst punishments ever. He took Prometheus, bent him backwards over a boulder in a mountain pass, and chained him into place. And the gods built chains that even a titan like Prometheus wouldn't be able to break. And he left him there. And he was going to be stuck there for all of eternity. But they didn't just leave him stuck there. Zeus had to add the extra angle of punishment. And the punishment was, every dawn, when the sun rose, out of the sky, Prometheus could see an eagle descending. And that eagle would swoop down, land on him, use its sharp beak to rip open his belly, eat his liver, and then fly away. And then because he was a titan and he was immortal, he would heal up. And then the next dawn, the sun would rise, the eagle would swoop down, rip open his belly, eat his liver, fly away. And then he'd heal up. Dawn, eagle, liver, rip, fly, heal. Over and over and over for hundreds and thousands of years. Poor Prometheus had his guts ripped open and his liver eaten for breakfast every single day. And that's what happened if you irritated the Greek gods. Over and over in these stories, you're going to see, you make Zeus and his brothers and sisters and sons and daughters and nieces and nephews angry, bad things happen. And it's not that hard to make them angry. But I use that word there, immortal. I am feeling ragged because last night I got almost no sleep. And the reason I got almost no sleep was my daughter kept me up all night coughing because she's sick. Now, if I was an Olympian, and if my daughter was an Olympian, that wouldn't be a problem because they are immortal. They don't get sick. They don't die by any normal means. They don't get old past a certain point. They grow to their full age and then just stop. We are mortal. We age. We get sick. We die. We get kept up all night with our daughter coughing in our face. All sorts of unpleasantness like that. But the first thing to realize for all these stories is the Greek gods were immortal, and they were super, super powerful. The Greeks believed the gods looked like us, only better. They were physically perfect. So basically, a palace full of the most beautiful people you could imagine, male and female. That's the Olympians. And they were so powerful, they had so much magic in them, that if a human ever saw a god in their true form, they'd burn to ash. So when the gods would come to Earth, they'd have to hide their power. They'd have to disguise themselves somewhat. And they came to Earth a lot. So, that brings us back to the snow globe. Crystal dome, land, mountains, rivers. Here's Atlas over here. Here's Prometheus over here. Poseidon was the king of the seas. He was the one in charge of all the salty waters. Up to a giant freshwater river called Oceanus that ran its way all the way around the edge of the earth. That was Poseidon's realm. That was the sort of territory that he got. Zeus's realm was everything above the land and above the water. So everything that you see, basically, is not underwater. And that brings us to the third brother, Hades. Hades was the god of the underworld. And the underworld was literally everything under our world. And it's important to know that the Greeks didn't think that Hades was an evil guy. He's not the guy in the Disney cartoon with blue flames for hair and trying to steal people's souls. No, Hades was a guy with a job. And his job was to make sure that the dead people stayed where the dead people belonged. Because the ancient Greeks believed that when people died, their souls went to the underworld. So here's a little bit how it would go. You die. Your family would have a funeral for you. They'd place a coin in your mouth as part of the funeral celebrations or ceremonies. They'd call that an obloi. And you'd lay there dead. And then your soul would drift down into the underworld and would come right up to the edge of a river, the river Styx. Now this river was a holy river, is sacred to the gods. Any promise that they swore upon the river Styx, they could not break no matter what. But as a human soul, you touch that water and you're destroyed. So you stand there on the edge of the river until out of the darkness and gloom, you see a boat coming towards you. And that boat is pushed along by an old man named Charon. Now you go to get on the boat and Charon holds out his hand. Because you're not getting on that boat until he gets paid for you to cross. So, you pull out that coin that your family gave to you, and you pay Charon with that coin. You have the coin, you get to go across. You don't have a coin, you become a restless soul, a restless ghost that will come back to haunt your family. So your family wants to make sure that you have that coin. Now you get across the river. And you come up to Hades' palace. And you are now in Hades' kingdom, which he named very creatively Hades. I student taught at a Washington middle school, and the name of the principal was Mr. Washington. So, Washington Middle School run by Washington. Hades is the kingdom and the guy in charge of it. Sort of like Mr. Washington. Anyway, you're back in Hades' kingdom. And you're going up to the gates, and there's a giant, humongous, three-headed, dragon-tailed dog guarding the gates. That dog's name is Cerberus. You do not want to make Cerberus angry. In that first story I told, Echidna, the mother of monsters, she slithered down into the underworld and gave birth to all sorts of horrible things. Cerberus was one of her children. And Cerberus, though, will let you go right through the gate because Cerberus's job isn't to keep you out. His job is to keep you in. He's sort of a prison guard dog as opposed to a warehouse guard dog. So you get in to Hades' kingdom. And you're drifting through the shadows and you come to the river Lathe. And you take a sip. And you forget some of your problems. You forget some of your life. You take another sip. And you forget more of your life. And you just have drink after drink until slowly you lose all memory of what your life up above was in the world above, in the light. And that's what happens. You die, and you become just a memoryless soul drifting through the shadows of the underworld. But let's say you're a really good person. You take care of the little old lady across the street. You never cheat at card games. You pay all your bills in time. You do all the stuff you're supposed to do. You know what happens then if you die? You become a mindless ghost drifting through the shadows of the underworld. Same darn thing. But let's say you cheat at cards, you rob from your neighbor, you do all sorts of like slimy, low-grade, nasty stuff. You know what happens to you then? You become a mindless spirit drifting through the shadows just like everyone else. To the ancient Greeks, that's what they believed. We all end up in the same place, in the dark, mindless, and alone. There are a couple of exceptions. If you are a great hero or royalty, you might end up in the Elysian Fields, which is a place of eternal springtime, and you get to have basically picnics for forever with all the other famous, important people. Even if they're kind of bad people, there's still a chance they could end up in the Elysian Fields. But if you were especially bad, if you made the gods especially angry, you might end up with some special punishment. One guy who wasn't so much bad, he just made the gods angry, was a man named Sisyphus. He was a king. And there are a lot of stories about Sisyphus, and basically he kept on being sent to the underworld after he died, and he kept on escaping. He kept on jailbreaking, kept on getting out. So the gods gave him a special punishment, basically just to keep him busy, so he couldn't get up to any more mischief. In the underworld, there is a hill. At the bottom of the hill, a huge boulder. And Sisyphus has to roll that boulder all the way up to the top of the hill, and he can't stop until it's at the top of the hill. But once he gets at the top of the hill, it rolls all the way down the other side. And then he has to roll it all the way back up, and then it rolls down the other side, over and over for the rest of eternity, purely to keep him out of trouble. But there's another guy, another king. His name is Tantalus. And there's different versions of the story, but all of them basically involve Tantalus doing the same bad thing. He invites the gods to dinner, and they come. They hide their magic, they come on down, they grace his court with their presence. He's a very important human, and he's even more important because the gods show up when he invites them to dinner, and he serves them, amongst other things, a very, very tasty stew. And after the gods have eaten the stew, and he's eaten the stew, he asks them, did they enjoy the stew? And they show proper appreciation for their host and say, yes, they did. And it turns out that there's a very special ingredient in that stew. His own sons. So, for whatever reasons, like I said, there's different versions of the story, he fed his own sons, cooked them, made a stew out of them, fed them to the gods. And the gods got very, very, very angry. This is not something he should have done. And so he got a special punishment in the underworld. In the underworld, you'll find King Tantalus chained in a pond with ice-cold water up to his chest. And above his head, big juicy bunches of grapes dangling just over his head. And they placed him there and they gave him a terrible thirst and a horrible hunger. But anytime he tries to reach for the water to draw it to his mouth, the water disappears. The moment he stands back up away from the water, it's right back up. Goes to drink, disappears, stands up, it's back. He's hungry and he tries to reach for the grapes, and the grapes always pull just out of his reach, no matter how fast he grabs or how sneakily he grabs, always just out of reach. And that's where we get the word to tantalize, to tease someone with hunger and thirst. Like a good cook might tantalize you with the smell of their cooking. And we get that word from this poor schmuck stuck in the underworld because he did a really horrible thing. Always hungry, always thirsty, never able to satisfy either one of those. So, that's the basic look of it. Dome, Earth, Underworld. And let's see. I think that's where I'm going to leave it for now. And next time, I will break into stories of those Olympians. We'll start with Zeus and Hera, and we'll tell a little bit about Poseidon, but save him some for later. Then Demeter and Hades. Hestia, I really don't have any stories about. Once upon a time, I used to tell a story about her, and then I found out I was wrong. That's actually a Hera story. Hestia is very, very boring, but kind of for a good reason. And then we'll get into Ares, Hephaestus, Aphrodite, Athena, Hermes and Dionysus. But that will be next time. So, have a good night. Good Lord and Butter, I almost made a major, major mistake. Something you do not want to make when you're dealing with the Greek gods. I forgot two of the Olympians. And I've forgotten the first time around too. The god and goddess twins, the god Apollo and his sister Artemis. And you see, me forgetting them was a major, major boo boo because you do not want to be rude or leave out any of the Greek gods because they're almighty, they're all powerful, and really, really sensitive and easily offended. And if you offend them, horrible things happen to you. Remember Prometheus? The only thing the guy did was give humans fire so they could like eat and have light at night, and he's stuck on a mountaintop with an eagle ripping out his guts each morning. So, never forget the gods and goddesses. And just to give you a brief rundown, because the thing is, you might forget them because it depended on what was important to you in life. Each of the gods had sort of this portfolio of things that they were in charge of, the things that were most important to them. And that's what you'd pray to them for. Zeus, king of the gods and their judge, he was the god of kings and judges. Hera, who was the queen of the Olympians, she was the goddess of queens and wives and childbirth. Poseidon, god of the seas. Demeter, goddess of the harvest. Hades, god of the underworld. Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Apollo and Artemis, again, don't want to forget them. Apollo was the god of like light and music mostly. Artemis was the goddess of moonlight and the hunt. Hephaestus was the god of smiths and makers. Ares was the god of bloody war. Athena, his sister, was also god of war, but she was more the god of wise war. And Hermes was a trickster and a messenger and a guide. And Dionysus, who came along later, was the god of wine. So if you were a king, you might pray more to Zeus. If you were a soldier, you might pray more to Ares. If you were a general, you might pray more to Athena because she was the smart one when it came to fighting, and Ares was basically a big bully. Smiths would pray to Hephaestus. And clearly, if you're a fisherman, and if you look at where modern Greece is on the map, you'll see it's surrounded by water. It's on a peninsula, and there's the Greek archipelago, all these islands scattered all around. If you're a fisherman, a sailor, you definitely want to pray to Poseidon. But you had to give honor to all of the gods. Leave one out, and it might get cranky like the fairy in Sleeping Beauty who didn't like being left out of the party. Except instead of, just cursing one girl in her household, they might, destroy an entire city because they're cranky and grumpy with you. And there'll be plenty of examples of that. But I'm glad I remembered. Leaving out Apollo and Artemis, horrible things might have happened to me, and actually especially to my children. But I'll get to that when I tell their story. And after I cover the Olympians, then I'll go into the stories of Heracles, the greatest of the Greek heroes, who you probably know mostly by his Roman name, Hercules. But now, I think it's safe for me to turn off the camera. So, this time, for reals, have a good night.